one of the problems with people pleasing is it looks like you're helping others when in fact you don't it doesn't come from a healthy place.
Hi everyone, I'm Autumn.
I'm Bob.
And welcome to the Examine Life Daily. Today, we are going to talk about the topic of people pleasing. And I'm really excited to see how this conversation is going to unfold. Before we started filming, Bob and I were kind of discussing the different intentions that we hope to share with you guys throughout this video. And we realized that we came from slightly different angles with people pleasing. And so we're going to kind of just dive in and have this conversation unfold between Bob and I really organically and naturally. We may agree or disagree on some points and definitely want to hear your input.
Absolutely. I recently read a book called The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate. And he talks about the myth of normal is that we live in a healthy society. We do not. And as a doctor, he studies how our trauma affects our physical body, the mind-body connection. That's a huge thing right now in science all over. It's undeniably true. Our mind affects our body and controls our body in amazing ways. And so he gave an example of Lou Gehrig's disease. There's this clinic that handles just Lou Gehrig diseases. At this clinic, people come in, and there are nurses there, intake nurses, who take their information and write it all down and then make notes maybe and pass it on to the doctors who will then see them and diagnose them. And the nurses came to the conclusion that if someone came in and they were really nice, they'd write down a note. She's very, very nice. She probably has it. And then another client would come in and wasn't very nice. Probably wasn't mean or anything, but just wasn't really nice. And they would say, this is not really a very people-pleasing nice person, so almost certainly does not have it. And then they'd go to the doctors. It was astonishing how often the nurses were right. There was a direct correlation between people-pleasing and this disease. And the best science we have now is that people pleasers are repressing their anger, and that repressed anger is killing them. So the mind-body connection works that way. The things you do in your mind and your heart, your emotions, affect your body. And there are so many examples, and this was just such a blatant one. A person walks in off the street, the nurses spend 10 minutes with them and diagnose them correctly based on personality. That just struck me so powerfully. I emailed Autumn and said, boy, this is so powerful, how our personality, this repression of the anger or whatever it is, there was been no studies that show that to be true, but it makes sense. This people-pleasing so powerfully controlled our body and how we lived our lives, and in their cases, ended their lives early. So I thought it was really a good topic. And so that's where this came from, that how powerful that mind-body connection is.
It's so powerful. There's some pretty solid research that shows when people are consistently in really oppressive environments, abusive environments, psychologically specifically. So even separate from the physical abuse. But highly psychologically abusive environments lead to reduced lifespan, a greater incidence of chronic illness and disease. And I think that really speaks to what you're sharing about the way that our psychological state impacts our body. And one of the ways that I think about this, I would often tell people psychological abuse is like physical abuse. And what I meant by that is, if you think about a time that somebody was really cruel to you, said something that was in a power hierarchy and put you down, there's like a gut feeling. You feel that in your gut. And that is actually stuff physiologically going on in your body because we feel our emotions in our body.
When I get ready to shoot a video, I think about my audience and how is this going to impact them all. And so it wasn't my idea just to talk about people pleasing. It was to make it a little more broad in general. And to my mind, it's this. As we're born and grow older, we face a lot of trauma. And so maybe we have parents that aren't meeting our needs. And maybe they're not meeting our psychological needs, or maybe not even our physical needs, or even, God forbid, they're abusive. And so our needs aren't being met. And what goes on is that a child sees that they're not being loved, they're not being kept safe, they're not receiving the affection that they need. And so deep in their subconscious, they think, what do I have to do to please them to get them to love me,
Yeah.
to protect me, to care for me and nurture me. And so they adapt themselves to be that. And in that process, two things happen. They become a false person, not the person they really are born to be, are on the inside. And the second part is they start to reject and repress and push down that real person, because if your parents don't even love it, it must be pretty bad. I must be pretty bad. And so who wants to face that? Who wants to face a parent that doesn't love them? And who wants to face the fact it's because I'm bad? Most mental health problems can many times be related back to this, putting on this persona, this false self, and shoving down the real true you, the completely worthy, lovable you, into the shadow, and learning to hate it, because that's why people don't like you, is this real person that's you. And so you to learn to hate yourself.
I really think you have the root of people pleasing. When Bob mentioned he wanted to talk about people pleasing, my mind went into a dichotomy where I thought, okay, oftentimes people fall into, generally, a pattern of behaviors. So like when I personally think of people pleasing, I think of it's somebody who's nice when they don't want to be. It's somebody who says yes when they really want to say no. It's somebody who is so agreeable that they don't believe they have a right to their perspective. So something more along the lines of codependency, or a sense that my worth is in making other people okay. However, when Bob and I were talking about this right before the video, Bob shared a really powerful point that people pleasing is really going to be essentially how we get our needs met. And so even something like aggression or bullying or a really assertive, dominant personality can also be a people pleaser, specifically if that's how somebody learned they were safe, okay,
Right.
and valued.
Right.
Bob, you're really sharing people pleasing is doing what I was told I was good, worthwhile to be doing. And it could look different ways depending on our parents, our society, maybe our gender, and a bunch of other factors.
Absolutely. So I think here's an example. You grow up in an Irish home, and in that, it's an old-fashioned Irish home. And so there's a lot of drinking, there's a lot of brawling, and you are born as a boy, and you have a sensitive heart.
Yeah.
That's just who you are, and that's wonderful. You are wonderful just the way you're born. I remember watching a movie, and it's a true story of a little boy born in Ireland, grows up and wanted to be a ballet dancer.
Yeah.
And so he lived his whole life, and he was just a mess because he couldn't. This thing was so powerful in him, this passion. Maybe you grow up in Ireland where your dad's a brawler, or an Irish home in Boston, or who knows. And you're rejected because you're sensitive and caring and compassionate. And so what do? You become a brawler. You become a bully.
Yeah.
And that's not you, but you've had to hate the real you and push that down. Get there. I can't stand to watch them.
Is it on my face? I'm like, what shampoo did I use? What is going on? I even didn't put on the chapstick. The flies are coming at me. Did it land right on my face?
It was out. It just crawled around by your nose, and I couldn't stand it.
Oh my God, because they do keep going at my head.
Yeah, right up at your head. Yeah.
I've pleased the flies.
You're a fly pleaser.
Man, I can't even blame Chloe.
So in this household, being a bully is people pleasing, because your dad's delighted. When you go out and get beat up and you're a pushover, he's mad at you. But when you go over there and fight and be a bully and beat other people up, he loves you. So people pleasing can be reflected in many things. And I think a lot of it, like you mentioned, was hormonal. Our society teaches women to be kind, to be nice. Niceness is everything in our culture. That women be nice, and be good, and make your man happy, and so on. It's a really big thing, and your hormones kind of push you that way anyway.
Right. Well, and what comes to mind with what you're sharing is looking at essentially where we're shamed. And generally speaking, this is going to be for males, although not exclusively, but when a male does have a loving, tender heart and wants to be kind, and that's shamed, that's really painful.
It is.
Yeah.
And in our society, men aren't allowed to touch each other.
Right.
But if you are a more of a feminine man, and touching is healthy for you, you are just shamed and blamed for that.
Right. Right. Well, it makes me think about the lifespan difference for each of us.
Yeah.
You know, and we were talking about like the Lou Gehrig's disease situation. Well, men live on average, I believe it's about 7 years less than women, just across the board, across time. We've talked in other videos about how important physical touch is associated with love. And whenever that has such a stigma against it. And also men experience higher levels of loneliness. This is also reported across time and culture. And it's very much associated with that sense of it's not okay to feel. Yes. If you're a guy.
You can't cry.
Yeah.
Go ahead and cry sometime and see how you're treated as a man.
You get beat up, right?
You get beat up.
You get beat up. Then whenever I think about that coming into learning our acceptability and creating that persona, it's here's how I am going to be safe, okay, admired, respected, valued. That then almost cuts us in half. It divides who we are.
Right. And you start to hate the real you. And because you've pushed it down, it's unworthy, there's something bad with it, it's defective. And so any hint of it is repulsive to you.
Yeah.
And you keep putting on this false self. And so it's a split. In essence, you can't keep that down. It bubbles out, that self-hatred comes out.
And that can make us sick.
Very sick.
Yeah, it can affect our bodies, it can affect our relationships, it can affect everything.
Yeah. It's really hard to look inside and to see that you're putting on a face, you're putting on a persona, a mask. The person you're walking around being isn't the real you, and that's very hard.
Right.
And looking at this thing that you have named as bad, as hateful, of not worthy of being loved, looking in that and letting it out can be very painful.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that requires so much courage. Shame, I would say, is probably the most painful, difficult emotion. I think there's books out there literally titled Toxic Shame. Some of the best researchers like Brene Brown and John Bradshaw really explored the tremendous impact of shame. And I feel like that's really what you're talking about.
It is what we're talking about, I think.
Yeah.
This shame that if I'm so bad my parents can't love me, boy, I am really, really bad.
Right. Gosh, I do. I reflect back on my life, the times that I was assertive, receiving messages from all different kinds of angles, that was somehow inherent against me as a female, as a woman.
Yes.
And that some of the great courage I've had to have in my life is to be assertive regardless, and to surround myself really with people who affirmed that. Our community helps to shape our sense of self for better and for worse, because an unhealthy community that does lead to sort of extremes or shames parts of who people are, that's going to lead to a fragmented sense of self. A really healthy, loving, wise, embracing community helps us find our authentic self and embrace it.
Right. A quote that I really love on this topic is from a man named Sidney Girard. He wrote a book called The Transparent Self. He's a PhD psychologist, and that was his main study, was people revealing themselves. And he said this: paradoxically, we fail to disclose ourselves to other people because we want so much to be loved. Because we feel that way, we present ourselves as someone we think can be loved. So in an Irish family, that makes you a bully. If you're a female in a good upper class family, that makes you calm and quiet and kind and generous. So we present ourselves in the way we think will make us be worthy of love. And we conceal whatever would mar that image. We camouflage our true being to protect ourselves against criticism or rejection. The protection comes at a steep price. We tend to lose touch with our real selves. And so we lose our trust. We just become lost. And we don't know who we are. We're this false self. And of course, we go through life with great difficulty because we're not our authentic self.
I think in so many ways, what you're talking about, Bob, is the root of a lot of psychological diagnoses. I mean, depression, even anxiety, that fear of, will I be discovered? I don't even know myself. one of the tragedies when we really deeply believe these messages that we're only okay if we do X, Y, or Z. That is the thing that we teach others in our life. We teach our children, we teach people who might be in our care. And I don't think that, for example, any father who is shaming their son, I don't think it's intentionally malevolent, or rarely, tiny percentage would that be the case.
Right.
I think it's more that that father is so deeply held on to the belief that this is what's shameful to be a man, and I don't want you to feel the shame, so inadvertently I'm actually going to give you the shame, and it turns into this just negative snowball that can go through the generations.
Yeah. Yeah, in this movie I'm talking about, the father was a wonderful guy. He fought it, his son becoming a ballet dancer.
Yeah.
But eventually he just saw that this is what he had to do.
Wow.
And he took his son to the tryout and was there with him and helped him along, and the son got into this prestigious school and became this great dancer. And so it's hard as a father to accept your son as being different.
Yeah.
Different from what the norm is,
Right.
the myth of the normal society.
Right. What this also brings to mind for me is one of my favorite treatment modalities ever. It's called internal family systems, and it is a therapeutic treatment modality that really looks at the parts of ourself within our own psyche. And the belief is that essentially every single person, the healthiest of people, everybody has multiple parts within them. And so this in many ways reflects Jung's map of the psyche.
Very much.
And so the parts of us that are rejected and shamed on the outside of us, they get rejected and shamed on the inside. Jung calls it the shadow. In internal family systems, they call it the exile. It's really the same thing. In that therapeutic treatment modality, you really get to know what's called your protector parts. So these might be the parts that hyper people please from kind of the niceness standpoint. It could be the parts that people please from kind of the more aggressive standpoint. Those are sort of known as our protectors. And the whole sort of intention of that methodology is to get integrated into a whole, to find, they call it the capital S self, or the higher self.
It's all a matter of living the examined life.
Yeah.
You know, it really is. It's going and looking inside and saying, what am I ashamed of? What's in me that I have so repressed? And of course, it's almost a cliche that whatever you dislike in other people, that's the thing you have repressed in yourself. That's a basic concept from Carl Jung, but it's really been proven absolutely true. So follow yourself, see what you dislike in others, and realize that is deep buried inside you. And to start a lifestyle of self-examination, of shadow work, and there's ways you can look into shadow work and find what you have repressed and shoved down into the shadow. And you have to be very careful, because this can be very, very painful, right, damaging things that you uncover. And that's a big advantage of going through a licensed professional who's been there. These are uncharted territories for you and I. So it's nice to be there with a pro who's been there before.
Well, absolutely. So a few things I think about with that. I think of this as akin to psychological surgery. I think you've referred to it as open heart surgery, right?
That's exactly how I referred to it.
Yeah. And so it takes preparation to do a lot of this work. You don't just go to surgery without any prep. You have your doctor walk you through all of these different, depending on the surgery, what kind of pre-surgery things to do. And then there's post-surgery recovery as well. And, you know, one of the things I really like to share with folks, it is wonderful if you can go through this with a counselor. I also know that a lot of folks aren't able to access those resources. And so one of the things I like to share are ways you can access this either for free or really low cost. I think 12-step meetings.
Absolutely. This is exactly what a 12-step meeting is all about. I owe my life to the 12 steps of AA. I'm not an alcoholic. I've never been a drug addict, never used drugs, never been drunk once in my life. But I'm a highly addictive person. And so I ended up in the rooms of AA, and I worked the steps. And I tell you, the first time I sat down at an AA meeting, for the very first time in my life, I knew I was home. This is where I belonged. I had found my people. The only time in my life I've ever known, these are my people, I belong here. It's shadow work. It's not called that. It's called personal inventory. The fourth step, we continue to take personal inventory. And so you take this personal inventory and you dig around there. And what I found was I believed that I was not worthy of love. And I don't know where that came from, but it was there. And I found a lot of paranoia in my life, the fear, a lot of this fear. And I have no clue where that came from. Maybe there were things in my life that I've repressed and can't get in contact with. I don't know. As time goes on, we'll have more and more exercises that will gently help you walk through self-examination, finding the shadow inside yourself. We want for you this self-exploration, finding that hidden gem down there in what seems like toxic muck.
As you were sharing that, I was just even thinking more and more about the significance of community and how in those AA meetings, the structure of them created enough safety to go into the open heart surgery.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think this is, I think, one of the reasons that we talk about, be careful with this, because if you were to do this shadow work in the midst of the environment that led to the shame and the illness and the toxicity, that will probably be even all the more traumatizing to you. But there's so many resources. There's a 12-step for everything.
Everything.
There's EDA, Eating Disorder Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Adult Children of Alcoholics, Al-Anon, Gamblers Anonymous. There's Sex and Love Addiction Anonymous. Gosh, there are so many. I think it's the power of community with a shared set of values, because I think of even something like an addiction like Smart Recovery is really a great place for people who are far more cognitive and don't want a spiritual component. But it really, even Smart Recovery definitely hits on layers of shame. There's Women for Sobriety, and all of these groups I'm mentioning do have to do with addiction. But that's because that's one of the areas where there's far more groups available for free, is in the realm of addiction. But you don't have to have an addiction to go.
Right.
That's what I love about what you share, Bob,
Yeah.
is that you found tremendous healing, even though you weren't an alcoholic.
Right.
You found healing with people who have alcoholism.
Right.
Yeah.
At my AA meetings, I got a sponsor, and he was an alcoholic, and he would tell me stories that curled my toes, and yet, and everything I told him was mild compared to what he had lived, and so I knew this was someone who'd been on the path before me, and loved me unconditionally no matter what, and that's really the key.
That is so huge. It's so vital. The power of acceptance, the power of saying it's okay to be you. A few more resources I want to share. I mentioned internal family systems therapy. There are some amazing books where you can do this work on your own. You can make sort of a one-time investment into the book, $24.99. I think there's a book called Self Therapy. I'll put links to these in the description below. And the reason I want to share these is if funds are an issue, there are ways to do this incredible shadow work without having to have a licensed professional. If you can go to a licensed professional, great. One other resource that I want to share, in fact, I look forward to sharing this more in depth, but artificial intelligence. It is an area I never thought I would be advocating for in the field of behavioral health, but it's free. It's not confidential because your information and data is out there on the web. I recommend deleting it if you use this. But that can be a place you can literally go to ChatGPT, create a free account, and say, I would like to do shadow work, or I would like to do something akin to internal family systems therapy. Guide me through it one question at a time. Again, knowing that there's a risk, anything you type could not be confidential, but that is a fantastic way to access healing from this material if funds are low.
Yeah, that's a great idea. One of the things I have said fairly often on this channel is that there are two important things you'll be doing all the time. One is that you take care of yourself. You have two hands, and the reason God gave you two hands is one is to take care of yourself, to love yourself, to look within, to do the shadow work, to discover who you are, and the other is to help others. One of the problems with people pleasing is it looks like you're helping others, when in fact it doesn't come from a healthy place.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't come from a place of loving yourself. It comes from a place of using someone else to love you because you don't love yourself. And so you have to do both. I make it my goal with every person that I meet to leave them better. And I do that, I hope, from a place of loving myself, from a place of knowing how hurt I have been, how terrible my life has been at times. And out of that compassion and self-awareness, I see people and I want to help them. So it's a pass-through of love, not the false thing of love me by me being really nice to you. That's harmful. But if I have found a place, if I've even just started to find a place of loving myself, of accepting and embracing my own self, my own flaws, all that's wrong with me and all that's good with me. And then if I will come from there and try to meet people where they are. And there's a quote from, it's attributed to John Wesley. Most people say it's not, he didn't say it, but it's a great quote, whoever said it. Do all the good you can for all the people you can, whenever you can, forever as long as you can. If I'm it's a cashier at a store and they're doing a great job and I say, man, you're really fast. You're really good at that. And the person is seen, and it's amazing how powerful that is. And if I'm coming from a place of loving myself and being grateful for the gifts I have been given, for any healing I've found in my life at all, then that's really healthy. And I am made so much better by seeing them. And they're made so much better by that simple nothing. I look them in the eye and I say, boy, you're really good at that. You're fast. You got fast hands. I'll say that. I worked in a grocery store a long time, and so that's something I see and think about. I don't know what you're going to say. Find something good in people. If nothing else, just look them in the eye, see them, and thank them. With everyone you can, do all the good you can as often as you can. Simple, but it can be life-changing.
What you were just describing sounded almost like this pure channel of love,
Right.
you know? And so, Bob, I don't think we disagreed on this at all.
No, I didn't think so.
Bob hit the root of it. Again, because I was sort of thinking of these different branches, and Bob hit the root. The way we experience acceptance from the outside world can be forced into the persona. The rest goes into the shadow. And what you're sharing is that a whole integrated life is really a life of tremendous beauty.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're here to be channels of love. Lord, make me an instrument of your love is a very famous prayer of St. Francis of Assisi.
I will do a voiceover with that prayer at the end of this video.
Excellent idea.
Yeah. Share with us, if you'd like, a time that you have been really courageous to allow that shadow to come forth. And what gave you that courage to do it? What would you share with somebody else who's maybe suffering in this sort of exiled shame? What would you want them to know? And we still are a new channel. We're recording this only about a month in from launching, so definitely help us grow. If you found this material useful, please share it with your friends, share it on social media. That like button goes a long way with the algorithm, and we love building the community here, so definitely comment.
You are the reason we're here, and you are the ones who will do the real work. So we need you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
The St. Francis Prayer. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.